All right, welcome everyone. Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating. It's the African Union's Continental AI Strategy, a plan they just released in July.
Yeah, it's making waves.
It lays out how this whole continent is thinking about AI, and it's not just about the tech
It's
use.
bigger than that, right?
Way bigger. It's about using AI to tackle these huge challenges.
And maybe even shifting how Africa fits into the global picture. That's what really grabbed my attention reading this document. It's not just, here's some cool AI stuff. It's like a strategic vision.
Using AI for development.
Exactly. Specifically targeted at issues that are unique to Africa.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the plan itself, can you kind of paint a picture of where AI stands in Africa right now?
Absolutely.
Because the document mentions these impressive numbers, but also hints at some roadblocks.
Yeah, you see that tension throughout. On one hand, they highlight this huge economic potential. We're talking AI could add $1.5 trillion to the African economy.
That's mind-blowing.
It is, but it begs the question how? Where are those opportunities?
Yeah, where specifically?
Well, they point to sectors like agriculture, right? AI can help optimize crop yields, predict food shortages, things that have a direct impact.
Makes sense.
Then there's healthcare. Using AI to diagnose diseases more accurately, even personalizing medicine.
That's huge, especially in areas where access to doctors is limited.
Exactly. And even in finance, we're seeing AI-powered solutions opening up access to financial services for millions of people who are unbanked.
Fascinating. So AI has this potential to be a real game changer for so many sectors.
Absolutely.
But then there are those challenges you mentioned. How developed is Africa's AI ecosystem right now?
That's where it gets complex because they mentioned over 2,400 organizations already working on AI.
Wow.
And a big chunk of those, like 40%, are startups.
Wait, 40% startups? That sounds really promising, actually.
It does show energy, a dynamic environment.
Yeah.
But it also raises questions, right? Can these startups actually scale up, compete globally?
Good point.
Do they have the resources, the know-how to really thrive? And that's where the hurdles come in.
So what are some of the specific obstacles the document calls out?
One of the biggest is the lack of access to supercomputers, which are crucial for processing all that data AI needs.
Of course.
And get this, there's not a single supercomputer located in Africa right now.
Seriously?
Yep. That puts African researchers, developers at a real disadvantage.
Wow, that really highlights the gap in infrastructure.
It does.
And speaking of data, there's this term they use, data sovereignty. What does that even mean in the context of AI?
So data sovereignty, it's essentially about African nations having control over their own data.
Okay.
How it's collected, stored, used. Which makes sense in this age of AI where data is gold, right?
Absolutely.
But right now, a lot of data generated in Africa. It's held by companies outside the continent.
So the argument is, if Africa wants to use AI for its own development, it can't just be sending its most valuable resource data somewhere else. It has to own it, right?
They need to have policies, regulations around data ownership, not just to protect their economic interests, but also to make sure AI benefits African societies.
That makes a lot of sense. So we have this huge potential for AI to transform things in Africa.
Yeah.
But also these serious challenges around infrastructure, expertise, and data control. And that's where this continental AI strategy comes in, trying to map a way forward.
Exactly. Laying out 5 key focus areas, almost like pillars holding up the whole vision.
Okay, so let's start exploring those pillars. What's the first one all about? All right, let's break down these pillars. What's that first one focusing on?
So the first pillar is all about maximizing AI benefits.
Which means?
Basically, it's about making sure this tech, this AI, is actually used to solve real problems, improve people's lives across Africa.
Not just AI for the sake of it, but AI with a purpose.
Exactly. Like, can you give me a concrete example of how this would play out?
Yeah, what would that actually look like?
Well, think about healthcare. Lots of African countries face these huge healthcare challenges, right?
Yeah.
So the strategy proposes using AI to diagnose diseases way more accurately and efficiently.
Interesting.
Even in remote areas where you might not have enough doctors.
Oh, that's smart.
Imagine, like, a mobile app powered by AI. You input symptoms, it analyzes them, provides a preliminary diagnosis. Could connect patients to the care they need so much faster.
That's a powerful example. Shows how AI can bridge those gaps in access and resources.
Right.
Okay, so what about the second pillar then?
Pillar number 2 focuses on building AI capabilities.
Okay, so this is about
Investment. investing in infrastructure, education, the skills you need to grow a strong AI ecosystem in Africa.
So it's about laying the groundwork for long-term success in AI.
Yeah, it's not just about, training coders, though that's important. It's about supporting research institutions, giving incentives to AI startups, establishing data centers, the kind that can handle AI development.
Makes sense.
Remember, we talked about that lack of supercomputers?
Yeah.
This pillar directly tackles that.
It sounds like a very holistic approach.
It tries to be.
So we've got maximizing benefits, building capacity. What's the third pillar all about?
All right, third pillar is minimizing risks, because AI, like any powerful tool, can have downsides.
Right. This is where we get into the ethics, the potential pitfalls.
Exactly. They're really highlighting things like algorithmic bias,
Ah, yeah.
where AI systems, if they're not designed carefully, can actually make existing inequalities worse.
Oh, for sure.
And, of course, there's the whole issue of jobs.
Automation.
Yeah, AI automation.
Yeah.
Could impact certain sectors of the workforce.
So it's about being careful, making sure AI development doesn't create new problems while trying to solve old ones.
Exactly. This pillar stresses ethical guidelines, regulations, oversight. It's about responsible AI development.
Right, making sure it's used for good.
And they also emphasize public awareness, education. People need to understand how AI could affect them, their communities.
That's so key. It's not just the technology, it's how it's used, who it benefits.
100%.
Okay, fourth pillar. What's that one about?
Fourth is all about regional and international cooperation. They recognize that with AI, no country can do it alone.
Right, it's a global thing.
So they're calling on African nations to work together, share knowledge, resources, best practices.
Collaborate, not compete.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just regional cooperation. They're talking about partnerships with international organizations, research institutions, even tech companies from other parts of the world.
Makes sense. AI is such a global field, lots to gain from sharing expertise.
And this ties back into that data sovereignty issue, too.
Yeah.
Making sure those collaborations actually benefit African nations.
Right, it's got to be a two-way street.
Exactly. They emphasize equitable partnerships, making sure African voices are heard, that AI development aligns with African priorities.
Okay, so we've got maximizing benefits, building capacity, minimizing risks, cooperation. What's that fifth and final pillar all about?
Last but not least, we've got stimulating investment.
Of course, gotta have the money to make it all happen.
Right. Developing a robust AI ecosystem takes serious cash. They acknowledge that both public and private investment will be key.
So it's about mobilizing the funds to actually make this vision a reality. Where is that funding supposed to come from?
Well, they're calling on African governments to step up, prioritize AI in their national budgets, fund research, infrastructure, education initiatives.
Put their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. And they're encouraging governments to create incentives to attract private investment, too, both from within Africa and internationally.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. Government support A&D, private sector engagement, to drive AI innovation in Africa.
Precisely. Creating an environment where AI can flourish, and that takes commitment from both sides.
All right, so now we have a pretty clear understanding of these 5 pillars that underpin this continental AI strategy. But I'm curious, how does the document see this actually being put into action? Is there a concrete call to action? So we've got the 5 pillars, but how do they actually plan to make this happen?
Yeah, it's ambitious, right?
It is.
And the document's not shying away from that. Implementing this won't be easy, so there's this call to action, very specific, aimed at different groups.
Okay, so who are the key players here? What are they being asked to do?
It starts with the African Union Commission itself.
Right at the top.
They've got to create this detailed roadmap for the next 5 years.
So it's like taking that big vision and turning it into a step-by-step.
Yeah, like a blueprint, but now you need the construction schedule.
Yeah.
Deadlines, specific tasks.
Make it real.
And it's not just the logistics. The AU Commission is also supposed to lead research on AI's impact across the continent.
So like measuring the effects.
More than that, we're talking economic effects, sure. But also social, cultural, even ethical dimensions of AI. They need to facilitate conversations, gather input from governments, the private sector, everyday people.
Make sure it's not just happening in a vacuum.
Exactly. Integrate AI into the AU's broader development goals. And collaborate internationally, too. They even talk about setting up an annual conference on AI safety and security.
Interesting. Specifically for Africa.
Yep.
So the AU has its work cut out. But what about individual countries? Where do they fit in?
Each member state is encouraged to develop its own national AI strategy,
Ah, right.
building on a continental framework, but tailored to their situation. That means prioritizing AI talent,
Yeah.
attracting experts, keeping them from leaving. It's just tough.
Yeah, and a global market, I bet. So how do they keep those skilled people from going elsewhere for better opportunities?
Got to create attractive work environments, policies that support AI professionals, competitive salaries, research grants,
The practical stuff.
even things like, is housing affordable? What's the quality of life? It's about the whole package.
Makes sense.
And then fostering a good ecosystem for AI startups, recognizing them as like engines of innovation, job creators.
Yeah,
But of course, none of this is free.
right. Got to talk about funding.
The strategy urges member states, make AI a national priority. Work with the private sector to secure funding for these projects.
Public-private partnerships, venture capital, that kind of thing.
All of that. It's acknowledging that governments can't do it alone.
Makes sense.
But here's another thing. What about the people who actually be using AI or affected by it?
Right. Are they just along for the ride?
That's key. The document is very clear. This is more than just governments and companies. Raising public awareness about AI is huge.
Getting people informed.
Promoting digital literacy skills so people understand this tech, how it might impact them.
So they're not just passive recipients.
Exactly. They even talk about AI education programs for specific groups. Children, women, people with disabilities. Because AI won't affect everyone equally, right?
Of course not.
And I think this leads to one of the most powerful lines in the whole document. It says, the development of AI is just beginning.
Ooh, I like that.
It's not a one-time project. It's ongoing. A journey with a lot we don't know yet.
And the African Union seems to want to do this thoughtfully, strategically.
With everyone on board.
That's really cool.
And they leave us with a question for every listener to think about. What role do you think AI will play in your life in the next 5 years?
That's a great question to end on. It reminds us this isn't just some abstract thing. AI is already shaping our lives. And it's going to keep doing so, probably in ways we can't even picture yet.
Exactly. And looking at how different regions are planning for that future, that's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
Well, thank you for taking us on this deep dive into the African Union's AI vision. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring. And remember, the future is what we make it.